in this video I am going to be resawing a very large lump of wenge. This is the end of it. It's a very heavy plank, and I want to put my Record Sabre 350 bandsaw through its paces. Now there's a couple of motivations for this video. First of all, as I've just mentioned, this is really speaking the ultimate test for any bandsaw, because I'm going to be cutting this that way. This is a bit too big to go through, so I'll have to take the end off it first. But then we're going to be putting through, really speaking, a full width piece of very hard wood through the bandsaw, and hopefully it will pass with flying colours. But I've never tried this before, so want to see how it copes, and also test out the blade. I've got an appropriate blade, a new blade for it, not the one it came with. More on that. But the other motivation for making this video is I've seen a couple of videos lately with titles along the lines of why you can't use a fence on a bandsaw, and that got me a little bit angry. Of course you can use a fence on a bandsaw. Now it might be true that on a very cheap bandsaw with a cheap blade you may have problems with the guides keeping the blade straight. It may exhibit a thing called drift. There are ways around that, but it is a problem on cheaper bandsaws. The Sabre 350 is not a cheap bandsaw, and this is not a problem I anticipate having. One of the videos I saw, I think there was an ulterior motive. I think the guy was trying to sell something, but anyway, I'm not going to link to those videos. Because it's blatantly untrue. Of course you can use a fence on a bandsaw, and that is what I'm going to be doing. I might use the Resaw bar on the fence. It depends how straight this plank is. But even if you don't have a Resaw bar, there are ways around it. This isn't meant to be a tutorial, but I just want to see how I get on. This is a very heavy plank. Well, when it's got the rest of it attached to it, it is. It'd be handy if there were two of me, but I'm just here on my own. Let's see how it goes. Right. First, I need a cut plan. Always go in with a cut plan. So I'm going to use this end piece, and I'm just going to draw on here what I intend to do. I'm probably not going to completely cut it all down. I'm just going to take the pieces that I need for now. Gives me a few options later. But one of those cuts will be the full width cut. So we'll see how it goes. This is my cut plan. I'm going to be taking slices along here. I'm not going to cut the full width because I'll leave it as a future decision what I do with this bit. Hopefully this crack, well this particular crack ends, but there is another crack over here. We'll see how we get on, but I think the cracks are only at the ends. That's what I'm banking on anyway. I don't know whether you can see the rings, but the rings are coming round. Let me trace a ring line. The rings come round like this. Whoops, I've gone off a bit there. So we've radial is that direction there. In other words, if we want quarter sawn timber, that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to be cutting this end off here, and then I'm going to try and twist the whole thing so that we effectively end up with quarter sawn timber for bridge, fretboard, and some binding material. 62mm off there, which leaves us with 236mm. In theory, the bandsaw will actually cut 280, so actually calling this the ultimate test is perhaps not accurate, because I'm missing 40mm. But it's still a tough test. It's 236mm depth of cut, which I think is enough of a test for any bandsaw. So I hope you'll forgive me that we're not going to the absolute limits of the bandsaw, but I do need usable timber. This is the blade I'm going to be using for the cut. Ideally you want, I'm told, only 3 teeth in contact with the work at any point. Clearly that's impossible for this type of cut, but this is a 3 tooth per inch blade, so it's acceptable, but it's 3/4 inch. You need a nice wide blade. One of the things that differentiates this blade from the blade that's supplied with the bandsaw, even though they're both 3/4 inch, they've actually taken the time to grind the weld smooth on this. The supplied band blade, it wasn't great, and it clicked every time it went through the bearings. Click, click, click. It's surprising how fast the blade moves. From the rate of clicks, you could hear that the blade is actually travelling at 30 miles an hour, which I hadn't realised. That's quite a speed. I'm hoping that you can see that the teeth are in sets of 3. We've got the set going that way, then that way, and then straight. Hence skip tooth raker. These 2 teeth are actually setting the kerf, the width of the cut, and then this is just clearing, and that's, I believe, why it's called a raker. Not aware of how to stow blades, 1 twist, 2 twists, and it should just fold up into a neat little hoop, well, with a little bit of adjustment. I've had to give the wheel adjuster a good turn clockwise to get the blade back that way. The much thinner blade that was on here previously needed to be quite forward because of the limits to where the blade guides can be set. So I had to have it at the front of the wheel. But now we've moved this back possibly ½ an inch. Oh, I've just used inches. 10 to 12 millimeters. Quick word about blade guide height. Ideally I'd have this lower, but I'm limited with the fence in this orientation with this here. Of course, if this was over here, I could have it lower. The fence will tip on its side, but it's a little bit awkward to do so because there's a nylon bush here over here which you have to remove. And also I may need to use the resaw bar, so I'm going to leave it like this, and the blade's going to be a little bit high, but that's not really critical. Well, that was easier than it had any right to be. It was very awkward, it was very heavy. It would have been easier if there were 2 of me. I've got a little bit of a dip here because it came away from the fence very slightly, and then I stopped it and repositioned the camera, so I've got a slight step there. But the rest of it's pretty straight. We'll carry on, put this aside for the moment, and we'll go for the big cut. All all I've done with that pass is just taken a few little high spots off. I've still got a little bit of a notch here, but hopefully this will travel across the table a little bit easier. And be very careful with wenge about rubbing your hand across it, because you do get splinters very easily, and I gather they're a bit nasty if you get wenge splinters. The fence guide is accurate, but only if you've got this bar set up properly. It has play both up and down and sideways. You'll see the obvious problem here. I pulled it out too quickly and it twisted. So I've got a little bit of planing to do. I've got a bit of a ski ramp here. This is usable. It's not terribly consistent in length because I did allow the board to move as it was going through. It's so heavy, it's very difficult to control. Obviously it's getting lighter. Yeah, I think I might try the rebar. The Resaw bar, sorry, rebar. The Resaw bar. See if that makes it any easier, because at least it'll mean that I've got a bit more leeway here. It may give me better results. We'll see. I'm feeling my way here. This is new to me. I'll try again with the Resaw bar. I've still got to be careful to keep the work firmly against the fence, or in this case the bar, but at least this way it gives me a little bit of leeway. If I drift a little bit, it should track true, but of course it will track to the face, not to the fence, but that's okay. I'm really pleased with that. It's pretty consistent. It's a little thin in places, but it's still thick enough. It's a bit thick at the beginning. I'm starting to have a bit of a dip. I think it's just the way the Resaw bar works, but that's okay because these are all longer than they need be. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. I'm getting the hang of it. the results of my labour. Backs and sides sets. I can actually split these down the middle and get two sides, although I will need to still use pairs to get the book match. I've marked the book matches down here. In theory this is quarter sawn. Hopefully I've got it fairly accurate. That's bridge material, and I've got fretboard material there. There's a little bit of a fault here. I think it's good that I cut this full length, because now I can choose where I can take the fretboards from. I'm looking at that thinking I can get 3 fretboards. This will be binding material when I've processed it down, but I'm going to be doing a bit of an experiment with this, because I might try laminating it with maple. That will be a future video. But yes, successful afternoon's labour. Well, that was interesting. Mixed bag there. In terms of bandsaw capabilities, I'm very impressed. It all went really well. I've got good back and sides, all usable. I did manage to get the cuts. There are some caveats. I think you need an in-feed and an out-feed table. The quality of the cuts would have been much better if I hadn't been struggling with the weight of the board. If I could have had it supported all the way through the cut, then I could have concentrated on keeping the board against the fence or the resaw bar, and things would have gone better. Having an extra person would have helped, but I think the important thing is the in-feed and the out-feed. Lesson learned there. Also, wear protection. It's very easy to get splinters from these, and I understand that splinters will get infected quite readily. I don't know whether you could describe this as toxic, but I was wearing a respirator for much of that, and I think that's quite necessary. You don't want to be breathing in the dust, and you want to get splinters out soon. You don't want to leave splinters in, they will get infected. So yeah, bandsaw performance great, my performance not so much. You may have already spotted these are not quarter sawn, they're almost flat sawn. Maybe we'll call them skew cut. I cut the wrong diagonal, which takes some doing, given that there were 2 prepared edges on my offcut. We've got the rough edge, the rough sawn face here, and the rough sawn face on the outside of the original board, and we have the planed face, and then the bandsaw cut and prepared edge here. Given that I wanted to have these 2 edges against the table and the fence, you can only cut that diagonal. So I'm going to have to look back at the video and see what went wrong, but I'm certain that one of the rough outside edges must have been against either the fence or the table. So that's a bit of a blunder. Somewhere in my planning things went wrong. It's not the end of the world for the stock that I wanted to have. Bridge blanks I can still get from the offcut from the end of the plank. Quarter sawn bridges still a possibility, and the binding, I haven't finalised the cutting of this piece, so I can still get quarter sawn binding. That's not a problem. So it's really just the fretboards. And is a skew cut fretboard a bad thing? Maybe some of you out there have experience of this. I think I would have wanted a quarter sawn fretboard, but skew cut might work. It's not completely flat sawn. There is an angle there. I think there's a shallow angle, I think, through the grain, and you could argue that it perhaps looks more attractive with the sort of the wider ring spacing of a skew cut. It's not what I wanted though, and I'm a little bit cross with myself. But it's all good experience. Let's move on to new projects. Oh well, I'll see you in the next video. If you were hoping for the answer to the puzzle of what these little tools are for, that will be in the next video. Sorry. Bye.